Welcome to Training Unleashed, the show that will help you design and deliver training that's off the chain and will make a difference. Now, here are your hosts, Cordell Riley and Evan Hackle.
Hey guys, welcome to Training Unleashed. Thanks for coming back. I know everybody's busy at this time of year. This show is going to be a little different for us. It's one that I'm really excited about. Got my business partner here with me as well. Evan, I know you're excited about this one. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic, and I think it's going to be the most fun I've had doing the show. So I'm looking forward to it.
I agree with you, Evan. I know one of the reasons it's going to be fun for me, and you're probably thinking the same way too, is we have a lot of our friends and colleagues here with us. We have Crystal Ramey, who leads up our L&D group. We have Dan Black, who leads up our learning strategy group, and we have Lee, who leads up our technology group. So with all of our friends, this is going to have to be a great show. So as we were thinking about this one, one of the things that we thought we'd like to do, obviously L&D, learning development space, is a space that we all occupy and love passionately. But typically at this time of year, people are starting to think ahead about what do they want to accomplish personally, professionally, in their business. And we thought we'd maybe spend a few minutes kind of thinking about some of the things in the L&D space that we're kind of seeing out there and share some tips. You guys all on board with doing this?
Yeah, that sounds great.
You cool with me maybe starting out with one that I've been thinking about?
Sure.
All right. Go ahead. So this one is probably my passion when I think about training, learning development, and all of those great things. And this is one that, even though it's a trend, it probably should not have been a trend, but it is, and I think it's really a great one. And that is aligning training with business goals. Not just doing training for the sake of training, checking the box. And don't get me wrong, I certainly know that there are compliance things out there that have to be done, but really thinking strategically about what is it that I'm trying to do inside of my organization, and how can training have an impact, if it can have an impact. Because we all know that training is not always the answer, but, thinking about what can it do to help me move forward. And as I was thinking about this, I kind of see two sides to the equation. So I'll talk to the presidents, the owners, the CEOs of businesses, the corporations out there. And as you're thinking about this, think about how you make training as part of your culture. Is it part of your mission statement, your vision statement about how you're going to get to that next level? Does training have a seat at the table? So you got all of your VPs of marketing, VPs of ops, and all of those things. There's training there. Think about training that way. My VPs of training, my directors of training, people on that side. Think about yourself as a business consultant. So you're part of your organization, but what is your organization trying to do? What's the business plan? What are the key metrics that they're trying to move? And how can training have an impact? Go out and read your annual quarterly report. Look for trends that you're seeing inside of your business. Can training have an impact there? So think about being that consultant. Also, start with the end in mind. You know what you're trying to do. How can you align training with those business goals? And the last one I'll leave you on this one is level 1, 2, 3, and 4. We all know about those. Think about that level 4. That's probably the toughest one to get to. How do you measure that return on investment? Did the training really do what you're thinking about? I know I said a lot there. Again, this one is the one I can be passionate about, guys. So thanks for allowing me to go down that rabbit hole a little bit. But, aligning training with business goals, I think is so important. Who wants to go next and share something they've been thinking about?
Cordell, I think you're right on point with that. Aligning the training with the business goals and making sure that you have the desired results in mind. And so my kind of trend that I'm seeing, and I'm happy to see it just with my experience, just across different industries, is this focus on who the learner is before you start to focus on what the result is that you're trying to accomplish, and aligning that with strategic business objectives. And so it's this tendency to move more towards a design thinking type of approach to developing your learning solutions, your learning interactions, and how you're putting those things out there. Now, this type of design thinking has been in the product innovation space for years. If people think about companies like IDEO, who've been around for 40 years and designing things like our coffee cups and our mouses and all of those things that are really based around human-centered design. How is this internet-enabled thing going to interact with an individual? And that's bled over into the marketing space in the early 90s, and now it's here in the training space. And I wouldn't say it's terribly new in the training space, but it is new as a massive push in the training space, where we have this learner-centered design thinking. Who is that learner? What's the behavior that you're trying to see change? And then how is that change going to drive results? As far as the strategy component of things, rather than a few folks sitting in a room trying to decide what their audience needs to know, almost creating a framework in a vacuum. Now there's a trend towards getting the people who are the actual targets of the information in the room and extracting from them what they need to know, and diversity of perspective. So all of those tools and techniques that you've seen used in other spaces as it relates to design thinking are now starting to be used more commonly in our space around that. I think I even saw a design thinking class at one of the local colleges from a business development perspective as it relates to learning. And in 20 years, I've never seen something like that. So happy to see that trend, and I hope it continues forward, because what I feel is that when organizations focus on who their learner is and then what the result that they want it to be, they can really sort of achieve great things and develop something that has a massive impact.
Training Unleashed is brought to you by Tortal Training, specializing in e-learning and interactive online training solutions for corporate, government, nonprofit, and franchise organizations. Tortal makes effective training easier. Just go to tortal.net to gain access to real-world tools that can make a difference. That's tortal.net, Tortal, tortal.net.
Dan, great points. And, I think you and I have known each other for quite some time, but I'll share this with the rest of our audience here. So I stumbled into training back in 1999. I did not study training in school. So, hey, Cordell, you're good at this. So why don't you go out and be the trainer? So I stumbled into it, and I used to just go out and start building things. To hear you talk about that who and that process of getting the people in the room that you're going to build, it is very powerful. So I've obviously witnessed it in the last 4 or 5 years that we've been working together. It is a game changer. It is powerful. So I can't imagine now really just jumping in and start building things without that, knowing who and that diversity of perspective. So it's a great thing to bring up, Dan.
And that's why we like to use the analogy in the development process of, building a house. Are you going to go out and just start building your house without having a vision of what you want that house to be? No, you're going to start formulating ideas. You're going to then, once those ideas have some coagulation to them, then you're going to hire an architect, and that person's going to map out a blueprint, make sure you don't get the wiring crossed with the plumbing. That could be shocking. I got to give that one to Dan.
That's a good one, Crystal. That's a good one.
That's all Dan right there. And then you build the house. So learning experiences is the same thing. You don't just build it. How do you know it's even going to link to the end result or connect with the learner if you haven't done the necessary steps up front? So I love this conversation.
Yeah, great point, Crystal. Great add-on. Lee, what about you, my friend?
Yeah, I definitely agree, Cordell. When you have the business goals and the training aligned, you're empowered at that point to create metrics around those things that you have your host of analytics and reporting that you can use to measure progress against those and make data driven decisions, right, that people can be comfortable with, because when you're based on data, you're backed up. Then those decisions can themselves be fed back through that process as you develop new goals and align training with those.
I think what's important also is, as a learning organization, it's important not to forget about how your learning experiences are going to integrate with your learning technology. That's the most critical piece. That is the venue that allows the learner access to those components. So if you don't think about that end, and also in that you have your business results, but if the learners can't get to it, then it's all for naught. So having that tight integration with your strategist all the way through to your technologists in learning is super important.
Very cool.
So I'll throw in sort of the big trend that I think is happening, and that is the ability with technology to create training plans for individual people. So in the past, it was sort of one size fits all. particularly because training was dominated, by live training. Now we have e-learning, which, obviously blended training. We're all big blended people, which we should be. But the idea that you create individual training plans for individual people, and that you're looking at the individual as opposed to just simply looking at the massive group. And to me, this is a very positive trend, because then people are taking their time doing the things that are right for them and not wasting their time doing things that they already know. And that's making training more effective, and it's also making people more interested in training, because what they're doing in training they see value in, as opposed to feeling like it's rote or repetitive. And I think
that's a great point, making the training relevant. I think there's another trend that we all know about, but we probably want to maintain the positive spin, but I'm still going to say it. It's a dangerous trend, and that's the trend to focus on, the shiny new button, or to just perpetuate myths in the learning and development space as it relates to humans. I know, Crystal, I see you smiling down there because, you and I talk about this constantly. And not to pick on microlearning as a very effective tool in certain spaces. But sometimes people see something like microlearning and they go, everything needs to be microlearning. This is how millennials learn. And
Dan, you got to add virtual reality learning too.
Yeah, well, yeah, all of them are tools. To go back to Crystal's analogy of building a house, right? You can't just say, well, I'm going to build my entire house out of plastic. I'm going to build my entire house out of wood because, it's the newest, greatest thing. We were all sharing a study done by Harvard Business School where they showed that when you're just using one technique, you are not going to get the impact. And unfortunately, you're going to waste a lot of money without a lot of results. In order to have that impact, you need to go back to that first statement that we're all talking about, and that's who that learner is and what are going to be the best tools. I know Lee and his team develop all different types of technologies to get information out to the learner.
We're so glad you're listening to this episode of Training Unleashed, brought to you by Tortal Training. The difference between Tortal Training and other online training companies is we're primarily a training company with technology, rather than a technology company that does training. Want to find out more? Just go to tortal.net. That's Tortal, tortal.net.
Dan, you said that was going to be, I don't think that was negative. I think that was sound advice. And what I hope people heard from that, and certainly what I hear every time we talk internally, is that we're proponents of all of these things when they're used in the right context. What are you trying to do? And can, microlearning or whatever this shiny new penny might be, can it give that desired impact? So I think it's sound advice that people should be hearing. Don't just because something comes out, don't just run to it and say, okay, we got to do it. Does it really have the impact that it's going to need? And is this the way my who learns, my audience? I did the who, Sally who. There we go. Where'd that come from? Is this where they learn all those great things? But no sage advice. Crystal, I know you're chomping at the bit to talk on this one. I know this is one of your passions.
Well, I think it loops back into what you said opening our conversation, Cordell, about, do you have a seat at the table? Well, one of the things that will increase your success of getting a seat at the table is truly being a learner matter expert and offering the right solution for the right action to change the right behavior. And that means that you have to know everything about all those shiny pennies out there, so you know how to tactfully say, microlearning might not be the right solution here, but this would, or maybe a blend of microlearning and this. So, showing up to the table and being able to express how these shiny pennies will move the needle in business strategy is what is going to build their confidence in having you as, a member of that table. So I thought it was a nice circle back into your previous statement.
Hey, if I Crystal, hold on one second. Crystal, I know that you've been in this situation, but what sort of advice do you have for the director of training or the training manager who is pretty much last on the budgetary list, and someone finally gives them a project and it's microlearning, and all they want to do is go, sweet, I got budget, yes, let's go do this, right? Because if they say no, they might not get the money. And they might not get the project.
I mean, here's the thing. What would my advice be? We're probably going to do things sometimes that we don't want to do. I mean, that's the truth. We might have to do it, and we might have to see that it fails, but those metrics become even more important then, because then you can demonstrate why, despite your best advice that was not heard, I can now quantify why this wasn't the right solution, and therefore opens up another opportunity for me to say, to rescue, to save the day.
So on that rescue note, let me chime in. I think building on what Cordell said and everyone here has said, the key to having a seat at the table is to truly understand the strategic plan of the company so that you can make recommendations that will hit the ROI of the company, back to what Cordell said. And I think this is really important, is training makes a difference. And if the company is looking to increase sales, can training help improve the average ticket? Can training improve closing rates? If the company is looking to be more efficient operating and taking cost out of the process, how does training do that? How do you build the tools, and then how do you measure them? And I'll give a little different spin on the micro learning. You know, I'm a big believer in micro learning for reinforcement and a technique to use for people that are already know, and this is reinforcing and reminding people of learning, as opposed to they need to take, you know, a lot of competency development, and instead of taking, you know, 10 courses, now they're going to take 100 courses. So if I was given that budget to do that thing, I would look to see how I could use it in the right way to help out. And say, okay, great, I got this micro-learning budget. This is how I'm going to use it so that it will be of the maximum benefit, as opposed to trying to develop micro-learning to accomplish something that's really not designed.
Hey, Evan, I got a question for you. So, you know, you've been CEO of organizations and what have you. So you tell your director of training, hey, we need some micro-learning for performance support because we need to reinforce at that moment of need what the learner has. But your training manager knows that that's actually not the right solution. What does that training manager need to say to you in order to get you to understand, but then still give them the money to get the job done?
Good question, Dan.
I'm gonna, you know, first off, for people that don't know, I ran a $5 billion business, and what probably people don't really understand about that business is that business was built around training. And it was a company that I was with, it was totally a $10 billion company. We grew from almost nothing to 10 billion in 20 years. We had an average growth rate of 29%. And our training department was totally fundamental to our growth. And that we always looked at how we could improve business through training. And a lot of what we did was new product initiatives and things of that nature, where the training department would come in a very comprehensive way and look at every aspect of training, including the incentive parts and things of that nature, in addition to the training. So I, as a CEO of a company, would never go to the person running a training department and say, this is how I want you to spend your money.
All right, so suspend disbelief, though, for a second.
Okay,
now you're a CEO, all right, but you're not like the best CEO on the planet. Okay, who just says, yes, I trust you completely, you're awesome, right? Let's just say you're maybe like a lot of other leadership team members out there who are focused on a lot of different things, and so maybe the right training solution isn't top of mind for them. They're worried about making Wall Street happy or making payroll. Now, what does your director of training have to say to you? What do they need to bring up to you to help you make an informed business decision?
They need to bring me two proposals. One that utilizes the money exactly as I requested them to utilize it and show me what it will do. And then here is the same amount of money, and this is my recommendation on how to use it. And this is what this will do. So I need to be respected from the perspective of, this is what you asked me to do. Here it is. And A, our team has been thinking about it. Here's an alternative for you to consider. So I have not said to you, I'm not listening to you and I don't care about you. I've said to you, here's what you want, and here's what I think you need, and you can decide which of these two paths that you think is the best for the company.
I think it's fantastic.
That's a great real world suggestion, Evan.
Training Unleashed is brought to you by Tortal Training, specializing in e-learning and interactive online training solutions for corporate, government, nonprofit, and franchise organizations. Tortal makes effective training easier. Just go to tortal.net to gain access to real-world tools that can make a difference. That's tortal.net, Tortal, tortal.net.
So let's do this, guys. I know that we can keep going on for another 5, 6, 7, 10 hours on this maybe, but Evan, you had a neat way to wrap this up. So let me throw it over to you.
Yeah, I just thought we'd end everyone with, one training tip for the season. And my training tip is to create budget for training as a percentage of revenue. And I like, as a general rule of thumb, and this is definitely does not apply to every business, but to just use this theory of 1% of revenue for training. And that to look at that 1% as how it will impact sales, how it will impact margin in terms of increasing margin or reducing costs. But to have a number, and that number, and have a budget for training, because so many companies literally do not. They might have a training person or two, but they do not budget for training. So that's my big tip for the year.
Thank you, Evan. I like that. So mine, make training fun and interactive. Those are just two things that I just believe so passionately in. And Dan, I'll go back to your who. When I do training, the who's that have a fun, interactive session seem to enjoy it, and they always seem to get something out of it. Now, it's not saying that it's not objective driven and you're not trying to drive real world results. You still got to have the objective, what you're trying to get accomplished. But if you can make it fun, get people to laugh, it kind of breaks down silos. It makes the environment much more conducive and interactive. I really do believe that people learn best when you can get them involved and actually do things that can be done in instructor-led, that can be done online, can be done a lot of different ways. But fun, interactive training, I think, is something we should all strive for. So that's my tip. Who wants to go next?
So I'll go ahead, Cordell. My advice for the new year would be to not just train your learners, but to also solicit their feedback, keep them involved in the process to the point where they feel like they're actually part of improvements that might be made or a part of the overall training plan. Keep them engaged, do your evaluations, do your surveys, and gauge against that.
Very cool. Thank you, Lee. Dan, Crystal?
Thank you. I feel like a lot of our advice has been very strategic, which I love and endorse. I'm going to speak specifically to the directors of training and their teams, their development teams. And what my tip would be to dismantle the assembly line. Have, learning matter experts who understand how to build a course from the very concept of, what the metric is, all the way to evaluating that metric and everything in between, from the design to the development. Don't separate these functions, because what you may end up with when you have multiple people in that line is a different result than you intended. And that doesn't benefit the organizations that you serve, and most importantly, the learners that you serve.
Crystal, that made me think about investing in the team. I think people really need to have that as part of who they are and how they're going to invest in their team. So if you're in a training role, what are you doing to keep your skills sharp? What classes are you going to? What workshops are you attending? So make sure that people have a focused effort on investing in that team also is one of the other things I thought.
Why don't we take this moment for Crystal to share the SAW meetings that we do and why we do them and how it helps, because I think this relates to this whole conversation.
Sure, I'd love to. So for our team, to Cordell's point, is, that old adage, the cobbler has no shoes, where we as professionals often find ourselves as we are so busy trying to enrich the others' lives through training, for us specifically, that we forget to train ourselves. So taking one of Stephen Covey's principles on being effective, the saw, sharpening your saw is very important. Taking time for yourself to hone your own skills and have fun doing it, and building things helps you become more efficient and a better expert in the learning profession. So what we do is every quarter we allot a certain amount of time for everyone on the team to build something that's not project related, that's something fun and gives them an opportunity to practice a new skill. And then once a quarter we have a SAW showcase in which everyone in the company is invited to attend, and then we just show off what cool things we learned and what we did. And it could range from, harnessing a skill you already have but you want to take it to the next level, or learning something completely new. And I find that it's just very motivating to step away from the work, and it's inspirational to inject new skills into your daily work. And inspired work means inspired learning.
Thank you, Crystal. Dan.
Those are fun meetings. Those are my favorite ones of the quarter, because you get to see just the designers and developers come up with the neatest things. So this is a fair point. And for me, I guess maybe my point is along the lines of invest in the team. It is really easy for organizations to think of the training function as a skill or a profession that is just developed naturally. And quite frankly, most of the time, there's a lot of education and communication. And Cordell, to your point, right? You just fell into the director of training probably because you were really good at explaining things, right? And the next thing you know, some folks are dove right into that role, and they're managing thousands of people, and they're doing what makes sense. And unfortunately, while this is not necessarily an overly complex thing to do, it's really easy to get wrong. And typically, if you're doing what makes sense, you're probably not doing it the most effective way. You're certainly doing it a way, but not the most effective way. So do invest in the team. And then when we start to look at even, down to the smallest element or the smallest rollout from an initiative up to big projects, go back to those 3 questions that I always like to ask. What are we trying to accomplish? How might we, not how could we or how should we, but how might we do that so that we can ideate around that and really get a lot of good ideas and diversity of perspective. And then once we come to a couple of solutions, don't stop there, go what else, right? And have that cycle of conversation, which doesn't have to take long, half hour, an hour with the right people in the room, so that you can get some really good ideas out there, toss out the ones that are those commonsensical ideas, and then really focus on the ones that are going to make the most sense and leverage your training dollars for the highest amount of impact.
Love it. Thank you, Dan. First of all, thank you all. Crystal, Lee, Dan, Evan, thank you guys. Some great feedback.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, our audience, for joining us for this episode of Training Unleashed. We certainly hope that you got some tips, some nuggets that you can take from this as you start to think about your organization for 2018. And from all of us at Tortal Training, we certainly want to take this time and wish you a happy new year. So take care, all. Bye-bye.
This has been Training Unleashed, but it doesn't stop here. Just go to trainingunleashed.net to subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be well on your way to delivering training programs that are off the chain. We'll talk to you next time on Training Unleashed.